The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt is a 2014 Pulitzer Prize winner that tells the story of a young boy named Theodore Decker. Theo is a young boy who lives in New York with his mother, and one day they went to a museum when unfortunately there was a bombing that occurred at the museum. He lost his mother but gained a ring that an old man had given him in the man's last moments of life. He also happened to steal the painting The Goldfinch by Karel Fabertus. On his way out, he made way with the ring and the painting. Social services eventually got to him because his mother was now dead and his father was nowhere to be seen. His father was a drunk who had run away when Theo was much younger. They also contacted his grandparents, but his grandparents simply didn't want him. So Theo went to live with his friend Andy Barber and the Barber family. While Theo was living with the Barbers, he also found the friend of the man who gave him the ring. The friend's name was Hobby, and the man's name was Welty. He also found a girl who was with the man Welty in the museum when his mother died, Pippa. After living with the Barbers for a certain amount of time, Theo's dad finally shows up with his girlfriend, Xandra. Theo takes him to live with Xandra in Las Vegas, Nevada. While he's in Las Vegas, Nevada, Theo finds a friend named Boris. Boris and Theo spend most of their days doing drugs, getting drunk, and getting into lots of trouble. Theo finds out that his dad does a bunch of gambling and has recently gotten into a bit of a bind with money. His father gets involved with the wrong crew and ends up kind of running away from his problems like he did with Theo. He gets into a car wreck and dies. Well, Theo decides that it's time to up and take the painting and move back to New York. So he takes his train and his painting and a dog and goes back to live in New York. When Theo arrives in New York, he doesn't really know who to go to. He knows he can't go back to the Barbers, so he goes to Hobby. Hobby teaches him how to fix antiques, and eventually Theo ends up working for him, selling the antiques that Hobby fixes. Theo's very good at selling the antiques and has the ability to sell them for a higher price than they're worth. When he gets into opioids and needs more money to buy them, he starts selling antiques as the originals, lying to people blatantly. People don't really question this, which is really unusual, until Lucius Reeves arrives. Reeves not only accuses him of selling the furniture for more than it's worth, but also accuses him of having stolen the Goldfinch painting, something that no one would have known about. Right now, the Goldfinch painting is hidden in a safe. Theo ignores Reeves' accusations and instead focuses on his engagement to Kitsy Barber. Kitsy tells Theo all about how Andy and Andy's father died in a tragic boating accident. And one night at their engagement party, all of a sudden Boris shows up. Boris tells Theo that they need to leave right away because he knows where the painting is. Stunned Theo, because this entire time Theo was under the assumption that it was safe in the safe that Theo had put it in. Well, Boris reveals that one night he had actually taken the painting from Theo when they were back in Las Vegas, and he had been selling it to different people for cash. Theo decides not to argue with Boris, so he packs up and they fly to Amsterdam. Theo, Boris, and Boris's crew have a plan to get the painting back, but when it all goes south and this man pulls out a gun and threatens to kill them, Theo actually ends up killing the other two men. Well, he decides to hide out in his hotel room until it's safe to leave. Eventually, Boris comes back and tells Theo that he's taking care of everything, including the painting, which he decided to give up and give to the police for ransom money. Well, he divides up the ransom money between Theo and his other men, and Theo heads back happily to New York with his money, no questions asked. When Theo gets back to New York, he sees Pippa again, and Pippa reveals that she loved him the entire time, but not romantically. Well, this leaves him a little bit confused, and so Theo decides to take a couple of trips around the world. This meme accurately represents my face when I realize that there's no solid conclusion on the story. Do Theo and Pippa end up together? Do Theo and Kitsy ever get married? What happens to Boris? What about Hobby? What does Theo do for the rest of his life? We don't really have a conclusion to that, and this is really how the story ends. One symbol that presents itself throughout the book is obviously the goldfinch. The goldfinch not only symbolizes Theo's relationship with his mother and how he yearns to hold on to that, but also it presents the idea of fate versus free will. Was it fated that the painter just happened to stumble upon this specific bird and then it happened to be born into captivity or captured in this specific household that the painter went to? Or was it free will that the painter knew that the bird was here? Some quotes that help to enhance the theme of fate versus free will are found at the end of the book. On page 767, it says, "Because what if that particular goldfinch, and it is very particular, had never been captured or born into captivity, displayed in some household where the painter Fabritus was able to see it?" This helps to show that it happened to be free will that the painter showed up to it, but was it fated that this particular goldfinch was at that house? Another one is found on page 771, and it says, "That fate is cruel but maybe not random. That nature, meaning death, always wins, but that doesn't mean we have to bow and grovel in it." This shows that Theo has kind of changed his way of thinking, and while his fate may be true, it doesn't mean that we have to respond in a way that fate may want us to. It kind of shows that we have free will in what happens to us and how we respond to it. Some questions that this book made me ask concerning fate and free will include, is fate true, or is fate caused by our own free will? Like, do things happen because of our actions, or are things already preset to happen? Another thing that I thought of while reading The Goldfinch was whether our actions and how we react to certain things affects what will happen next. Like, if Theo had reacted better to his mother's death, had he ever gotten into the amount of trouble that he had gotten into? And if he didn't hate his father so much, had his father shown up? This is kind of a stretch, but it's just something that I kept throwing around in my mind while I was reading it. On a real note, though, something that makes this book very difficult to read is how many subplots it has. It has his love affair with Pippa, it has his friendship with Andy, it has his friendship with Boris, it has his drug abuse, it has his mourning of his mother, it has his friendship with Hobby, it has the whole thing with the painting. It's really hard to follow at times, and sometimes it seems that things have been slipped in just for the fun of it. Taking everything into consideration about this book, I wouldn't really recommend it to people. It's really difficult to get through, and it also doesn't really have a lot of reward at the end. There's so much subplot that you would expect a lot of things to happen when you're finishing the book, but it kind of just dwindles out slowly with small resolutions and a lot of unknowns. I don't think that the book is astonishingly written. I think that it's written well, but I don't think that it has anything special that really makes it worthwhile. The book is super long and really confusing, and I just don't think that it's the best that it could be.